The rain had stopped hours ago, but the pavement still gleamed black under the truck's headlights. He had been driving for 12 hours straight, watching one small town after another vanish into the rearview mirror. Then he saw it, a sign leaning crooked in the dark. "Welcome to Coldbrook, population 1204. But as he rolled into the heart of town, there wasn't a single car, not a single light in a window. It was a place that looked lived in, but long since abandoned. He parked his 18-wheeler on Main Street, the air brakes sighing like a tired beast. Neon signs flickered without power, a diner stood open with its door swinging, and a payphone dangled by its cord, swaying slowly as though touched by invisible hands. The silence was absolute. No barking dogs, no humming street lights, no wind. And then, just as he cut the engine, he heard it, a low, dragging shuffle echoing from somewhere down the street. Not the wind, not an animal. Something with weight, something moving on 2 feet. His pulse hammered. He leaned forward, peering through the windshield into the long stretch of lifeless storefronts. That's when he saw the first one. A figure standing perfectly still beneath the busted marquee of the old theater. Motionless, but watching. He blinked, and another appeared, this one halfway across the street, pale in the glow of his truck's lights. Then another, and another. The trucker reached for his keys, but his hands shook. The town wasn't empty. It never had been. And as shadows crept closer, step by deliberate step, he realized the mistake he had made. He had stopped. Coldbrook was not marked on most maps. Truckers who ran cross-country routes knew the names of every gas station and diner worth stopping at. Yet this town had the kind of absence that felt deliberate, a place the road itself seemed to forget. But when his rig rolled in that night, tired and desperate for a rest, he unknowingly stepped into one of the darkest stories ever told from America's highways. Some towns die slowly, storefronts shuttered, lights gone dim, people moving away until silence takes hold. But Coldbrook was different. It looked untouched, like time had pressed pause. Cars still sat in driveways, a newspaper rested on a porch, a swing moved gently in a backyard. It wasn't abandoned, it was waiting. And what waited there was not human. Whatever walked those empty streets had learned the shape of men, had studied how to stand in silence, how to emerge only when headlights cut the dark. To the weary trucker who stopped for just one night, it felt like the whole town was watching him breathe. If you're listening right now, you've already stepped onto that road with him. You've put your hand on the same worn steering wheel, you've heard the engine go quiet, and you've felt the silence that followed. Subscribe, like, and comment where you're watching from. Your country, your city. You're part of this haunted journey now. And once the story begins, there's no turning back. This is not a tale of ghosts you can laugh off, nor of legends that stay behind in old books. This is the story of a man who drove into a town that wasn't supposed to exist, parked his truck on a street that should have been empty, and discovered he wasn't alone. The rain-slick highway lay behind him like a cauterized wound, cooling in the night. His Peterbilt groaned as it settled, chrome breathing out the last heat of the drive. Coldbrook rose from the dark without warning. A crosswalk, a row of brick facades, a theater's broken grin of bulbs. From the cab, the town looked like a paused film frame. Not ruined, not thriving, just waiting for a hand to press play. Stillness clung to everything. A stoplight hung over Main and blinked no color at all. Dead lenses staring. The post office flag pointed nowhere. A barber pole stood unspooling red and white in the reflections of his headlights, though the pole itself did not turn. Somewhere close, water dripped at a steady, patient tempo, as if counting him in. The air held the metallic bite of old rain and the sour edge of meat left out too long. He killed the engine and climbed down. His boots found the street with a hollow clack that felt too loud for a place this quiet. Headlights stretched twin spears through the dark, catching dust he could not feel moving. The diner door across the way hiccuped on its hinge. Open, sway. Open, sway. He smelled coffee that had died hours ago and the ghost of fryer grease that never really leaves a wall. Inside the diner, history waited in place. Booth vinyl shone with that cleaned yesterday sheen. Napkin holders were loaded and aligned like soldiers. On the counter, a piece of pie slept beneath a glass dome, congealed, its crust puckered like old skin. Sugar had crusted around the rims of cups. A calendar by the register insisted it was June 23rd, but the year had been torn away. The jukebox in the corner caught his beams and stared back with a jukebox's false smile. The sound came thin and dry. A shoe scuffed concrete somewhere beyond the headlights, not hurried, not timid. The lazy correction of someone who knows the street by heart. He turned toward the theater. Under the shattered marquee, a figure stood in the speckled glow. No sway, no shuffle of breath. The posture was almost right, almost casual, yet the head tipped a fraction too far, as if learning the angle from a photograph. "Hey, you all right?" His voice snagged on the silence and came back smaller. The figure offered nothing. No lift of the chin, no human fidget to prove life. Then another scuff answered from the pharmacy doorway, and a second shape took its place, shoulder brushing the glass. The pharmacy window reflected the street, but the reflection was wrong. His truck showed, but not his silhouette. Farther down, a third presence found the mouth of an alley. Pale where the light reached, erased where it didn't. They weren't coming closer. They were simply appearing, as if the town were exhaling them. He backed from the diner and slid into his cab, doors thudding shut with relief he didn't trust. In the mirror, he counted shapes the way drivers count axles. One by the theater, one by the pharmacy, one near the hardware store's collapsed awning. The CB hissed as if waking from a bad dream. He thumbed the mic, voice kept low by instinct. "Breaker. Anyone reading Cold Brook? Anyone got eyes on Maine?" Static climbed the band like frost. Somewhere inside that static, his own question returned. Thinner, stretched, repeated with an extra word. "Anyone got eyes on him?" He flicked the key. The starter chewed, caught, coughed, died. Headlights stuttered and brightened, dragging the street into cruel detail. Faces were not faces so much as arrangements. Features too recessed, or placed a breath too far apart, like sketches not yet corrected. He rolled down the window an inch. No wind, no night insects, only the payphone at the corner lifting itself into sound. A shrill ring that should have felt normal, and instead felt like the town clearing its throat. The crowbar lived behind the seat. He took it anyway, and a flashlight besides, beam tight and mean. The figures did not flinch. He angled the light into the diner again and found new marks on the tile, wet ovals too neat to be boots, too round to be bare feet. They led from the door to the counter and back again, as if something had walked a circle while he looked away. Droplets tracked across a menu, smeared the ink of the specials. The jukebox made a small, cheery click deep in its throat. Music rolled out in a faint ribbon. A syrupy croon from a century ago, needle hiss and ballroom drums, the song pretending there was power in the wall. His flashlight cut across the jukebox's plug, slack and dead on the floor. The croon didn't care. It played anyway, and the figures outside bent their heads, not to listen, but to measure him as he listened. He retreated step by slow step, the crowbar a cold weight, the flashlight beam jittering on the chrome. Back in the cab, he locked both doors, then locked them again because he didn't trust memory. In the windshield, the street seemed to tilt, storefronts leaning as if the foundations had softened. The payphone stopped ringing. The silence after was heavier than the noise had been. He reached for the key one more time, bracing for the sick churn of nothing. All at once, the headlights died. The world folded to black. Something brushed the bumper with a sound like a palm sliding on paint. He felt the truck's springs take a little weight. Then, from the sleeper behind his seat, 3 calm knuckles, knocking from the inside. The knock from the sleeper hung in the dark like a bruise that wouldn't fade. He turned half around, eyes on the narrow bunk, waiting for the blanket to twitch, the pillow to compress. Any proof that the sound had been only metal settling. Nothing moved. The truck's interior felt crowded anyway, as if the air itself had filled with someone else's breath. Then the payphone at the corner began to ring, clean and surgical, cutting the night into pieces. He stepped out with the crowbar and the flashlight, boots sucking at the wet street. The figures he had counted were gone, erased as neatly as chalk from a blackboard. The phone booth waited alone, light dead within it, receiver swaying like a pendulum. He pushed the folding door, and it shrieked the way old glass does, sticky and small. Inside smelled of copper and mildew, the perfume of flooded basements. The phone book hung fat and swollen with damp, pages fused into a single clotted organ. The receiver burned cold against his ear. Silence answered, then a dry crackle like wind walking through bones. A voice formed inside the static and told him not to have stopped here, not to have let the engine die, not to have given the town his weight. The words were his cadence, his gravel, his breath. Hearing his own voice from a dead phone cut deeper than any threat. He dropped the receiver. It swung and kept speaking, a pendulum telling wrong time. You shouldn't have stopped. You shouldn't have stopped. Then, as if correcting itself, we know your name. He lifted the receiver again, forcing himself to listen. The voice did not use that name yet. It took the long way around, describing him instead. The white crease of a scar on the right knuckle from a chain binder that snapped. The coffee stain shaped like Idaho on the left cuff of his denim. The 2 dimes and a button in his pocket he'd forgotten until now. The static laughed without sound. It recited lines from his logbook, miles and dates, and quoted a fight from a truck stop 2 winters ago, word for word. He traced the cord down the phone's belly, expecting cable tucked into conduit. The sheath ended in a mangle of copper whiskers, green with age, feeding straight into cracked concrete and nowhere else. No junction box, no line. Above, a nest of night insects should have spun in the booth's light. The bulb was dead, yet a dull glow still bled from the chrome faceplate as if remembering electricity. He nudged the phone book open with the crowbar. The first pages were blank, not clean but erased, faint grooves where names should have been. Deeper in, faint pressure lines mirrored his handwriting, the ghost of miles he hadn't yet driven. Something rearranged itself outside. He angled the flashlight across Main Street and found them again. A row of silhouettes spaced evenly along the curb as if measured with a tape. They didn't approach so much as arrive, snapping into the positions a breath closer than before. Heads tilted in the same wrong degree, a class learning posture by looking at one broken example. One lifted an arm in a movement that didn't consult the elbow first. Another bent as though its spine had been taught only by shadows. They had learned stillness perfectly. Motion, not so much. He retreated to the cab and grabbed the mic. "Breaker," was all he managed. The CB salted itself with whisper and sent his word back to him 3 seconds later, thinner, surprised that it existed. Another layer slid under it, a woman's voice that carried the patience of an operator from another century. It listed numbers that lived only in glove compartments. An outdated Doughty number he hadn't used in years, the serial etched on the fire extinguisher bracket by his knee. Tire pressure readings he hadn't checked tonight. "Say again," he tried. The radio obliged with an exact copy, then appended a phrase he hadn't said. "He hears us now." Across the street, the diner jukebox breathed to life without moving. No electricity, no hum, but a waltz unrolled, warbly and brave like a memory pretending to be a song. The payphone exhaled a click and spat a tarnished coin into the tray, a token stamped with a logo he didn't recognize. Mist filmed the booth's glass from the outside, though the night air was dry. A child-sized handprint pressed into the fog and slid downward, leaving 5 clean tracks. Then another print beside it, and another, as if something small were testing how clear the view might be if it rubbed hard enough. He forced himself back across the street, meaning to rip the phone from its mount and be done. The receiver, still swinging, snapped against his knuckles as if impatient. The voice on the line shifted. Not his voice now, but something close to it wearing the edges wrong, like a mask, damp with someone else's breath. It spoke a syllable that fit him. Not a full name, only the first bite of it, chewed, tasted, set aside. The second syllable followed, less confident, then the third, finding rhythm. The booth's glass trembled with that rhythm, each syllable a tap from the outside, a knuckle keeping time. He ran for the truck because instinct beat style every time. In the windshield, the town's storefronts bowed subtly inward, as if the street were a throat swallowing. The engine turned and failed, stubborn as a dying thing that still wants one more breath. Condensation bloomed across the inside of the glass, not from his breath, but from someone writing. Letters unfurled backward, made for outside eyes. S-T-A-Y. The last stroke dragged longer than it should have, as if the finger that made it didn't like stopping where the letter ended. The phone resumed ringing without waiting to be hung. With each peal, the silhouettes stepped off the curb together, souls not quite meeting the street. In the mirrors, he found the theater's doors yawning wider than broken glass should allow, lightless and pulling. The CB whispered with all the delicacy of hospital sheets. "Time now," the woman's voice said, gentle as if breaking bad news. And behind her, his own voice repeated the same words a second later, trying to catch up. The receiver in the booth spoke again, shaping his full name so softly the knight had to lean close to hear. He clamped his hands on the wheel and stared at the sleeper curtain, daring it to move. Behind the glass, behind the fabric, behind the dark he owned, something shifted its weight the way a person does when rising from a bed they believe is theirs. From the street, in perfect unison, the figures raised their hands as if greeting a returning friend. The phone on the corner, the CB on the dash, and the sleeper behind him spoke together, 3 mouths sharing one throat. "Open the curtain." And then the curtain began to open, inch by careful inch, and the hand doing it wasn't his. The curtain quivered as though fingers, unseen and patient, pinched the fabric from the other side. He sat frozen behind the wheel, every muscle locked in refusal. Inch by inch, the sleeper revealed itself. Not a void, not untouched, but lived in. The pillow bore the undeniable imprint of a head that had rested there only moments before. The blanket sagged with a weight already gone. It looked as though someone had just risen, and he had arrived too late to catch them leaving. The figures outside stopped their strange procession. They lined the street in 2 symmetrical rows, each one posed like mannequins rehearsed to perfection. The tilt of their heads deepened, vertebrae bending at angles human bodies weren't meant to sustain. Their stillness had the power of a threat. They didn't need to move closer. They only needed to remind him that escape was an illusion. He yanked the curtain shut, locking it with trembling fingers. The relief lasted seconds. Air pressed against him from every seam of the cab. Not wind, but a cold seep, thick and sweet like formaldehyde. He gagged on the chemical tang, the smell of something preserved beyond its time. He twisted the key, desperate for the roar of the engine. The starter growled, coughed, faltered. Dash lights flickered like dying stars. Then, in unison, every needle on every gauge spiked to its limit before slamming back to 0. The truck felt as though something had taken control of its heartbeat. The CB crackled awake, this time not with the scratch of static but with layered voices. Dozens of whispers tangled into a chorus, rising and falling in waves. He pressed the mic to his lips but said nothing. They were already speaking for him. 1,000 breathless throats repeating, blending until one phrase separated itself clear and sharp. "We know your name." The windshield misted over once more, slow and deliberate. He wiped at it with his sleeve, but the fog returned faster, forming words in backward strokes. This time his name appeared fully, not a fragment, not syllables half-guessed. The whole of it, complete, undeniable, written by a hand that knew him better than he knew himself. He felt his chest collapse inward at the sight, a bone-deep recognition that he was not a stranger here. He was expected. Outside, the dead marquee of the Coldbrook Theater snapped alive in a blaze of bulbs. Light bled across the street in unnatural clarity, too clean for wires that had long been severed. The cracked signboard, once littered with the broken teeth of old lettering, now carried only one title. His full name, glowing white in the dark. No showtime, no coming soon. Just him, as though the entire town had gathered for the screening of his life, and the curtain was already rising. He shoved the crowbar against the glass, as if violence could erase what was written. The steel rang harmlessly, neon brilliance untouched. The figures on the curb lifted their arms in unison, palms outstretched in a gesture too synchronized to be anything but rehearsed. Their heads tilted further, sharp enough that necks should have snapped. From the CB, the whisper swelled. From the payphone, another shriek erupted. Not a ring, but the scream of metal bent beyond reason. The receiver's cord stretched taut, pulling itself out of the booth, dragging across the street like a snake. It slapped against his truck's door and hung there, demanding. He dared not touch it, yet even from where he sat, he heard it clearly. The voice on the other end, his own, unmistakable, repeating his name over and over, each syllable slower, heavier, as though stamping ownership into the night. He clapped his hands over his ears, but the name didn't stop. It wasn't sound anymore. It was vibration in the metal, rhythm in the glass, the weight of the word pressing into his skull. His name didn't belong to him now. It belonged to Cold Brook. The town had claimed it. The town had claimed him. The marquee flared brighter, flooding the street with a blinding white glow. For a heartbeat, he thought he saw the theater doors yawning wider, stretching impossibly tall, opening to swallow. Every figure on the street turned toward that black maw in perfect unison. And then, as if on cue, the CB, the payphone, and the voices outside spoke together. A chorus woven from three throats. The show begins now. The trucker's grip on the wheel slickened with sweat. He didn't know if he was about to drive, run, or simply vanish, but he understood one thing with absolute certainty. The curtain had opened, and Cold Brook was not finished with him yet. The chorus still echoed in his skull. The show begins now. The voices hadn't faded with the silence. They clung to his bones, vibrating through the steel frame of the cab. He pressed both palms against the wheel as though it could anchor him, but the Peterbilt no longer felt like a truck. It felt like a stage prop, placed exactly where the town wanted it, under a spotlight he could not escape. Outside, the marquee blazed brighter than headlights, brighter than lightning, his name written in fire across its face. Every bulb pulsed in rhythm with his pounding heart. The glow consumed the street, erasing the pharmacy, the diner, the post office. Only the theater remained visible, a single building carved from light and shadow. Its double doors yawned wide, blacker than the night, waiting for him to enter. He whispered a prayer to no one, the words tumbling without faith. He told himself to stay seated, told himself that dawn would scatter this madness. But when he blinked, he was already outside. Another blink, and his boots were on the steps. The crowbar slicked in his grip, his pulse loud in his ears. It was not choice that carried him forward. It was invitation. The doors opened wider, not with hinges, but with hunger. He stepped into the dark, and the air struck him cold, sharper than any freezer. The carpet under his soles yielded too much, spongy and damp, as if woven from threads soaked in old blood. The smell was heavy, mildew mixed with something sweet and chemical, like the stench of preserved flesh. Rows of seats stretched into the dark. Every chair was filled. For a heartbeat, he thought they were mannequins staged for spectacle. Then one head tilted and another followed, a ripple of acknowledgement spreading through the crowd. They were no mannequins. They were people, or something built from the memory of people, each face blurred or imperfect, features misplaced by a fraction, like wax figures left too near heat. The screen at the front flared to life. Static hissed, then melted into grainy film. His truck appeared, filmed from outside, barreling down the rain-slick highway he had driven only hours ago. He watched himself at the wheel, yawning, sipping bitter coffee, rubbing the ache from his eyes. Every mile replayed with unnatural precision, as though the town had been filming him long before he arrived. The reel jumped. The payphone, the diner, the curtain in the sleeper. All of it unfolded on the screen in real time, his movements mirrored without delay. Then, the worst shift yet. The projection jumped ahead, showing what had not yet happened. His truck sat abandoned across Main, its doors flung open, headlights dead. The cab was empty. The street was silent. The film panned slowly to the theater doors, wide and waiting, light pulsing from within. The reel burned in the top corner, but his image did not melt. His face stared back, untouched by the fire. The audience rose as one. Not fast, not frantic, but in perfect synchronization, every body lifting from its seat like a choir answering a cue. They turned toward him in the aisle, 1,000 eyes too reflective in the projector's glow. Their hands lifted, palms outstretched, not to strike but to claim. The air swelled with their silence. Then the voice came. Not from the projector, not from the crowd, from everywhere. A chorus woven from countless throats, layered with whispers stolen from highways and diners, CB calls and phone lines. They spoke his full name with crushing precision. Hearing it from that many mouths at once split him open. The name was no longer his. Cold Brook had taken it, and in speaking it, the town had devoured the last of his identity. The projection froze. Bold white letters scrawled across the screen. 3 words that pulsed with the heartbeat of the room. Do not leave. Each pulse sent a vibration through the floor, through his boots, up into his chest. He backed away, panic breaking into action. But the theater was longer now, the exit farther away, stretching as though the building itself resisted him. He ran anyway. The crowbar clattered in his grip, the spongy carpet sucking at his boots. Behind him, the audience moved, their synchronized steps whispering against the floor, closing in with patience rather than haste. He lunged for the brass handle of the doors, reaching, gasping, and the projector stuttered one last time. The screen no longer showed him. It showed his truck, parked outside, doors wide, empty, waiting. From behind, 1,000 voices surged together, filling the theater in one impossible command. The show isn't over. The words still rattled the air, every syllable echoing from the theater walls. He froze with one hand on the brass door handle, staring at the screen behind him. His truck glowed there, parked outside with its doors wide open, headlights dead, cab empty. Waiting. The projection wasn't a warning. It was an instruction. The show couldn't end until he played his part. He wrenched at the doors. They didn't budge. The brass was ice beneath his palms, freezing him to the spot. Behind him, the audience advanced down the aisles in unison, footsteps soft but endless, a tide of not-quite people. Their faces reflected the light of the burning reel, features sliding in and out of recognition. He saw old friends, waitresses from midnight diners, fellow drivers long dead, every face the road had ever given him, now staring back, hollow and unfinished. The screen flickered again. Not his truck this time, not the streets of Cold Brook. It was him, standing right here in the theater, hand clutching the brass handle, eyes wide and lost. And then the film jumped forward, showing something that had not yet happened. Him dragged back into the rows of seats, lowered into the front row, forced to sit as the reel played on. His chest tightened. The town was already projecting his fate. The projector flared brighter, and text scrawled across the image. Now, starring. The words burned white. Then, letter by letter, his full name appeared beneath them, bold as a movie credit, too large to ignore. Jack Mercer. The name he had carried for 50 years. The name he hadn't spoken since entering this cursed town. Cold Brook spoke it now for the world to hear. The audience erupted, not with claps, not with cheers, but with the sound of hundreds of throats opening at once, a dry, rasping exhalation that shook the walls. Every figure pointed at him, arms stiff, accusing, welcoming, binding him to the role. He staggered back from the door, crowbar shaking in his grip. His name wasn't his anymore. The town had stolen it, printed it, projected it, immortalized it. He screamed against them, a ragged sound swallowed instantly by the cavernous room. The projector advanced again, showing him seated in the front row, his face slack, eyes glassy, watching the very film he stood inside. He stumbled down the aisle, trying to stop the reel, but the light only grew, flooding his vision until the world was nothing but blinding white. The hiss of celluloid was the only heartbeat left. When the light dimmed, he was no longer standing. He was seated in the front row, exactly as the reel had promised. The crowbar was gone. His hands rested limply on his thighs. The screen in front of him showed the highway stretching forever, empty and black. But reflected faintly on the silver surface, he saw the audience. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Every seat filled with truckers, waitresses, drifters, strangers, all of them staring silently at the film, all of them trapped. The film jumped one last time. The words, "The End," flared across the screen. The audience tilted their heads in perfect unison, as if asking him to agree. But he understood now. There would never be an end. The reel would start again, play his arrival once more, loop his fear, repeat his capture. This theater wasn't showing films. It was writing them, trapping lives into endless screenings. His name still glowed on the marquee outside. It would stay there forever, one more credit in Cold Brook's collection. Jack Mercer was no longer a trucker on the road. He was part of the cast now, a role rehearsed and recorded until the town found its next star. And as the projector rattled back to its first frame, as the white flash became the blacktop highway once again, the seat beside him creaked. Another traveler sat down, unseen. Another story beginning. Another victim caught in the reel. The reel spins forever in Cold Brook. Jack Mercer's story doesn't end. It loops, playing again and again for an audience that isn't alive but isn't dead either. His name burns on the marquee like a gravestone carved in neon. Drivers still roll past that stretch of road at night, headlights glancing across the crooked sign that welcomes them to a town no GPS will ever find. Most don't stop, but every so often one does. And when they do, the marquee changes. A new name flickers to life. A new star takes the stage. No one speaks of Cold Brook on the radio. No one writes it on a map. But the highway keeps whispering its legend, mile after mile, warning after warning. Some towns die quietly. Some towns rot. Cold Brook performs. And once you see your name burning above its theater, you never leave. You only join the cast. If you survive this journey with me, share your thoughts below. Tell me if you've ever passed a town that felt wrong, a place too quiet, too staged, as if waiting for you. And if you're brave enough, tell me this. Which road would you never drive alone at night? Because somewhere out there, a marquee might already be waiting, with your name